Hello everybody, it's the Historical Gamer once again, and today we are going to be taking a first look at a new game which came out within the last month on Steam called Bomber Command. This is a strategy game which puts you in the shoes of the American forces commander during World War II in the air war over Europe. As far as I can tell, there is no implementation of the actual Bomber Command, that being the British Empire's bomber forces. It seems to be just a US bombing, daylight bombing campaign game, but there's not a lot of those out there. So let's go ahead and check this out. I'm a big fan of Gary Grigsby's Bombing the Reich. That is a much more detailed and complex version of the air war over Europe, although probably daunting for most players and also badly showing its age. And it doesn't hold up too well, and War in the West is a little too simplified for my taste in how it handles bombing. So let's go ahead and take a look at this game. It's made by Silent S Studios. I think it's like a one-man shop, but I'm not sure. We'll go into the options here, very basic options, just resolution options, nothing else. So let's go ahead and start a game. It looks like if you play this, you have 3 options on when to start. You can start in 1942, 43, or 44. I don't know what the mightiest thing up here means. Maybe later on you can choose a different command. I'm not sure, but it looks like there's no option to change this right now. Additionally, there are 3 different difficulty options: an easy, a normal, and a hard. We're gonna play on normal, and I guess we'll go ahead and play 1942 just because that's the earliest start date. So that seems interesting to me. Most of these kind of games, whether it be War in the West, which I believe starts in 43, or Bombing the Reich, which starts in August of 43, you don't get to start the air war quite so early. So let's go ahead and start in 42, and let's go ahead and start. All right, so the game has a kind of click-through tutorial here. So when you first jump in here, you get a pop-up screen that tells you, right click on installations, create missions for targeting that facility. You can change the location of waypoints by clicking and dragging. You can use the WASD keys to move around the map. You have the overlays features. Most of this stuff is pretty straightforward here. I'm curious if it gives us any information about winning here. Forces, supplies, reinforcements, 48 aircraft. You can form a new unit. Use clout to gain successful missions, cash and command points that will make your campaign even more efficient and effective. German industry as both a whole and of individual facilities. Okay. U-boat operations will have an impact on the quality of supplies you get, and so they must be dealt with. Undertaking research projects for advanced technology. Okay. More successful. Okay. How do you win? All right, so you can hit the F2 key to bring this stuff back up at any time. All right, so this is the main screen of the map. You can see, obviously, it's a map of Northern Europe, all the way down to Southern France, but mostly it's focused on sort of Northern France and then Belgium, Holland, and into Germany. I don't know if more mission or objective types pop up eventually, or different kinds of targets pop up. You can see there's different types of targets represented on the map by different icons. The air bases in Western, or I guess in Eastern England here, all highlighted here. No groups at most of these. It is 1942, so most of these air bases are empty right now. We do have some. You can see Polbrick as the 97th Bomb Group with 48 B-17s. But you can see here, this is the map of Northern Europe. It's pretty basic and whatnot, but actually it's okay. I mean, it's fine. You've got different overlays here that show you different information. So you can see there's flak overlays, which indicate the strength of flak. The darker the yellow, the stronger the flak there. The lighter the yellow, the less strong. And then the radius of the flak. You've also got fighter coverage represented by these red circles, which come off of these air bases, and estimated strength of the fighters at given bases. You've got weather, which shows you cloud cover, which was a major thing in the campaign against the Reich's resources. You've got ranges for different fighter aircraft. So there's P-47s, P-38s, and P-51s. These are basically just concentric rings. You don't actually, I'm not entirely sure how, if this factors in like dogfighting or other things like that that shorten the range. Really not sure on that, or if it's just anything in this circle and they can cover it. That's one of the interesting things that Gary Grigsby's game does, is you have to plan out when the fighters join the formation, when they leave the formation, and you can time the aircraft to take off at different times, which allows fighters to reach up at different points in the mission. So there's a lot more detail to the mission planning in that game than there is in this. We don't have P-51s or P-38s yet in 42. We do have P-47s, so we'll leave that ring on. Let's go ahead and turn the weather off for now, and we'll leave this as is at the moment. That's the overlays up here. You've also got an option to advance to the next day, the options screen, which is, again, really bare bones. You have a mailbox, which gives you information about missions that have been completed in previous days. You have the intel screen, which gives you information about different things in the game. So you can see here, if we look at German industry, oil refinery, we've got 7% recon of different oil refineries. We estimate that the enemy is producing 62,211 something diesel fuel, 8,471 aviation fuel, and 4,079 synthetics. I don't really know what that means. Like, I know what synthetic oil is, but I don't really know how that influences the actual gameplay. You've got ball bearings factories, you've got aircraft manufacturers, engine production, steel and metal, like all these. I'm assuming all these different things factor into the overall economic efficiency of the Germans, and presumably that influences how many aircraft the enemy is able to send against you. V weapons also show up, although right now it doesn't look like that's on the map, so maybe that'll be something that shows up later. Let's see here. Logistics, I'm assuming logistics has to do with bombing bridges and things like that. You've also got bridges as an option here. You've got marshalling yards, tank production research facilities, shipyards, all that kind of stuff. If we go over here, you can see there's convoy rates and U-boat stuff. So I assume this is where things directly will factor in your damage to the enemy. So right now you can see convoy losses last month, 400,000. Enemy U-boats sunk last month, 6. U-boat efficiency, so 100%. If 100% of the convoys were sunk last month, I guess that would equal to 400,000 tons. It seems a little bit low, but whatever. U-boat efficiency, 60%. Efficiency in finding U-boats is 5%. Efficiency in sinking U-boats is 5%. And you can see here convoy losses in this month so far, 0, 0, whatever. You've got a list of the different industrial facilities when you click on this icon here that shows you their damage and whatnot. And then that's kind of the intel and the enemy. We can go to the command and control screen where we can cycle through our own units. So we've got the 91st Bomb Group with 48 B-17s, 848 already, 0 damaged, 500 air crew. That's 10 crew per bomber. So to form a new group, you need at least 48 bombers and 480, I think, air crew in order to operate those units. But 500 air crew ready for 48 bombers. I guess that's 2 spare crews. Nobody's wounded right now. You can see morale, skill, courage, organization, training, and motivation for each unit. We've got the 97th Bomber Group as well. Colonel John Garrett in command at Polbrook. The 91st is at Bassingbourn. And then you've got the 356 Fighter Group of 26 P-47s, 1 damaged, 25 ready under Colonel Archie Old. And then their stats down here. So what is this all about? Presumably bombing the enemy. I'm guessing we need to try and reduce the enemy U-boats to make them less effective, which will then allow me to get more supplies and stuff. Oh, one other thing. We click here, we can see the depot screen. So right now we don't have enough aircraft to form any new groups, but when you get 48 aircraft in surplus, you can form a new squadron, assuming you have enough air crew to man that squadron. So you have B-17s, B-24s, P-51s, P-47s, and P-38s. Looks like we are getting 15 B-17s a week, 9 B-24s a week, 13 P-47s a week, 7 P-38s a week, as well as 150 crew. Additionally, we are getting 40,000 gallons of fuel per week. We have 40,000 in stockpile right now, and we are getting 1,600 tons of munitions a week, 800 in stockpile right now. You also have command points which you can assign to different priorities. I don't know if you get more command points as you earn prestige or however it calculates success, but you can see here Atlantic patrols increase the efficiency of aerial patrols in finding U-boats, helps close the gap in the mid-Atlantic where U-boats could operate with impunity. Naval equipment increases the effectiveness of destroying U-boats. Convoy protection improves the effectiveness of guarding convoys. Self-promotion improves sort of your reputation, I guess, if you're promoting yourself within the service. Weather sciences improves weather forecasting results. So there's a fog of war element to this as well. Like we saw the screen where it showed damage to different factories and whatnot. That's an estimate based on latest recon. That can be right, that can be wrong. Weather can be right and weather can be wrong. So those are things you have to factor in. Fighter priority improves the theater operations so that new fighters are built and more likely to be prioritized to you rather than another theater. So improves fighter replacements, improve bomber replacements, and more supply ships assigned to the transatlantic route, which gives us, I guess, more supply. That's the depot screen, or that's the command screen. So I guess right now we've got 3 points. What do we want to do with that? I suppose self-promotion seems important. Get more command points. So yeah, that would definitely be something we would want. More command points so we can sort of build a snowball effect. Probably more naval equipment to make destroying U-boats more effective. And more Atlantic patrols to screen enemy U-boats. Now, and that uses all 3 of our command points. Now, I do find it interesting. I'm not sure if U-boat losses influences B-17, B-24 losses. Obviously, the B-17 and B-24 could cross the Atlantic on their own. So I wouldn't think U-boats would matter so much there, although it certainly would matter in terms of the ability to import munitions, import fuel. All that stuff has to travel by sea. So anyway, so this is sort of a high-level overview of the game's features, I guess. Let's go ahead and actually, do what this game is about. Let's go ahead and bomb someone. So let's see here. We've got a U-boat pen at Emden we can try and bomb. We'll go ahead and recon that base. It looks like it's just inside some fighter cover, and there's a fair bit of flak here, but it's along the coast, so I'm assuming we won't lose too many planes hitting this base. Let's go ahead and right-click to start a mission. Again, we already did the recon here, that's why it's purple. Let's go ahead and we could do a fighter sweep, I guess, but rather than do that, I only have 1 fighter squadron, so I'm not really going to be able to sweep and then escort. We really can only afford to escort right now. Let's go ahead and bomb the target. We can choose 2 bombing groups, each of 48 bombers. We're going to actually choose them both, so that'll give us a raid of 96 B-17s coming in. That's a pretty big raid for August of 42, and obviously as the war goes on, those raids are going to get bigger and bigger and bigger as we have more and more groups. So go ahead and launch this raid with 96 bombers. Takeoff time we'll set to 5 o'clock. We'll go ahead and, well, it's a bit further away, so let's actually set it to 6. It'll influence when we arrive over the target. Let's go ahead and choose next. We've got 1 fighter squadron which can escort with 25 P-47s. So fighter escorts we can actually change the takeoff time to. Which would matter from a speed perspective, because if they're too far ahead of the bombers. So actually this is kind of like Gary Grigsby's War in the West, or Bombing the Reich then. It just doesn't give you the visuals of knowing where they're going to intercept the bombers for support. All right, so we'll do that. We'll do 30 minutes after. Hopefully that's a good window. Let's go ahead and pull this waypoint after we exit the target back over the ocean. I want to get those guys away from enemy fighters as quickly as we can. So what we'll do here is we'll hug the coast as we cross Holland, and then we'll get out toward here, or the initial point in toward the target. It's right along the coast, so hopefully that isn't too bad. Weather forecast 1 out of 10. There could be some cloud cover, but not too much. So let's go ahead and advance to tomorrow, I guess. I think that's what kicks off the raid. I only have those 3 groups, so I can't plan any other raids. We could do recon elsewhere, though, right? So let's do some recon on some other ports. This is a U-boat pen, though, right? I am going to focus on the U-boats early on, so interesting that these ports in France are not U-boat pens, although there is the U-boat yard, I guess. It looks like we're limited to only a certain number of Bordeaux has U-boat pens. Looks like we're limited to a certain number of recon missions. I'm curious why Brest isn't on here as a U-boat target. Maybe that changes later in the war. It's still somewhat early. It's August of 42. Anyway, let's advance to the next day. You can see here the clock is ticking. Remember, we're taking off, I think it's 6 o'clock to the Emden raid. If you click on this little down arrow, I believe this is what allows you to determine whether you're actually going to be in charge of dropping the bombs or not. It'll simulate it otherwise. So if it's green, you get to do it. If it's yellow, you don't. So we'll keep it as green so I can show that feature off. And yeah, we're just waiting as the time moves forward. Doesn't appear to be any option, unless there's hotkeys that I'm not aware of, for accelerating or slowing down time. But we don't have to wait too long here. All right, 6 o'clock. The plane should be taking off. No sign of him though. Or it was 6:30? Oh, so when I changed it to 6:30, that wasn't the fighters being delayed. That was just the whole mission. Okay. So I guess there is no option to set fighters to take off at a different time. You can use the mouse wheel to scroll. You can see, obviously, this is the map of, same map, just with green coverage. You can see the fighters are out front, so there's no way to pull them back to be with the bombers, I guess. So they're going to sweep out ahead of the bombers. You can see there's two groups of bombers here in this sort of diamond-shaped formation. Behind, they're following their course. The different waypoints here. There's no control around altitude or anything like this. So, like, it definitely has aspects of Gary Grigsby's Bombing the Reich. I hate to keep bringing it up, but it's the only other game I can think of that is kind of like this, except Grigsby's game is massively more detailed. This is very simplified. But it is also just recently released, and I believe the dev is going to continue releasing patches because it doesn't feel fully complete. This game is $15 on Steam, so it's not too expensive, but it's also not the cheapest game ever on Steam, so things to consider. You can see flak, and you can also hear little pops of flak as it moves over the target. All right, so here we are in the bombardier screen. You want to keep these crosshairs, if you will, level in sort of the middle of the target. You can use horizontal correction to move the arrow left and right, and you can use vertical correction to move it up and down. Seems to be moving... Can't really tell. It's on a little bit of an angle, which I'm assuming has something to do with like wind. It's not moving dramatically. It's still fairly in the center of the target here. That's going the wrong way. So we just dropped him on this little section of buildings there. I was basing it off the time to the target up here. So I think that was roughly on target. Hopefully. It doesn't seem like this screen here changes based on your... no sign of enemy fighters yet either. It doesn't seem that... and then you can see here there's smoke and whatnot kicked up by the debris from the bombing raid. It doesn't seem like the map that you're dropping bombs on changes based on mission. You would assume if we're hitting pens, there would have been water, other things like that involved. There wasn't. And again, there's no real way to accelerate this. There is an X here where you can issue a mission recall or continue mission. I don't know if issuing the recall will actually speed things up or not, but I don't want to mess with that raid. That seems like we dropped relatively on target. You can see the fighters are heading back to England. And again, the graphics are very basic and sort of straightforward. In terms of sort of streamline and simplification, there's only one B-17 model. There doesn't appear to be like B-17F, B-17G, that kind of stuff. It just seems to be B-17 or B-24. So again, a little bit simplified there. But you know, I don't know if there's different speeds for different bomber groups or other things like that. I kind of doubt it. It seems like it's just trying to make things as approachable as possible. All right, so that's the end of the day. We are now on August 18th. If we go here to the mailbox, we can see the mission results. We didn't lose any bombers or fighters. The enemy didn't send any fighters up against us, and we are reporting moderate damage against the pens. No real, you know, one of the things I think about when I think about bombing U-boat pens is the, you know, different types of bombs and whether you could actually penetrate the U-boat, you know, concrete, whatever. And that doesn't seem to be a factor here. It says 135% damage. I don't know how that's possible. Go ahead and put another recon over there. We could go for Wilhelmshaven for today's mission if we wanted. Do a second raid there. That'll be a little bit further out beyond my P-47's escort range. It'll also be a little bit closer to the Oldenburg airfield, so maybe we'd deal with some enemy fighter activity if we do that. So let's go ahead and bomb that. We don't have 48 aircraft ready. We're down to 44 and 43, so presumably flak and maintenance is keeping some aircraft on the ground. We actually have a few more fighters, though, because we only had like 25 before, and I believe we pulled some from the surplus there, and now we're up to 35, so we actually have a slightly larger fighter force to escort us. We're going to leave the time at 18, or at the standard takeoff time, which I believe is, what, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock? What's the weather going to look like? Not too much cloud cover over Wilhelmshaven at the moment. Most of our mission should be relatively safe. Can't change the initial point, though. All right, so we'll go ahead and recon. Oh, wait, I already did that. 4:10 is our takeoff time. No. What am I doing here? All right. I want to recon the target, though. There we go. All right, so we're going to recon both those pens. There's also some oil refinery up here that we could try and target, and there's some steel mills or metal works, aircraft factories. They build 109s, 87s, 88s, and 110s. I don't know what, like, the Ju-87 or 88 matters in this game. I don't know that it does. Maybe when the campaign in Northern Europe starts in June, it'll matter. I'm not sure. Let's go ahead and just jump ahead real quick here, and we're going to start the mission off earlier in the day. You can see the fighters forming up, the bombers getting going. One thing I do feel like, and maybe it's just a fog of war thing, but the losses seem to be crazy. I haven't played this game a ton. I played it about 30 minutes before we started recording, but I launched a raid on a couple of fighter factories in central France, and in one mission it said like we shot down 70 enemy fighters over France, but then we lost like 60 fighters of our own, and we only had 2 groups of 48 involved. So it was kind of like it seems like the casualties can be absurd. I know we didn't lose anything to flak, but it does seem like casualties can be really, like, I know casualties in the bombing campaign were high, but nothing like that, and especially on the fighter side in an individual raid over France that was fully covered by fighter escorts. That seemed a little bit crazy. Maybe our coastal strategy is keeping the enemy fighters off us. So far, no sign of it. They do look like almost like, you know, angry bees or wasps when they do get involved, which is kind of a cool thing. But you can see they're coming in here. I'm not going to choose to drop the bombs myself this time. Oh, there they are. You can see the little fighters swinging all over the formation. Our own fighters swirling around. Right. They drop their bombs. You can see one of the aircraft appears to be leaking coolant or something like that with its white trail indicative of damage. I think the enemy might have wiped out my fighter screen. As I was just talking about casualties, I do not see any fighters left, which will be nuts if they wiped out our entire 35 group of P-47s. I know deep penetration raids of Germany in 42 is probably not super realistic, but also keep in mind that until those larger raids started, a lot of the German fighters weren't over Germany. A lot of fighters were still in the eastern theaters. As the air campaign heated up against Germany, the Germans would recall a lot of their forward fighter units back to defend the homeland, if you will. And so that plays a factor into, you know, the size of formations and raids as well. Maybe not the raids, but the interceptors. Anyway, you can see the bombers returning to base. I think they wiped out my fighter squadron. So that's nuts. All right, so the first group of bombers went back to base. Second one is now as well. Okay, so we lost 1 bomber, which is not bad. We lost 28 fighters while shooting down 17 enemy fighters. Okay, that's nuts. Meanwhile, it claims very little damage to Wilhelmshaven. So if we take a look here, we just reconned Emden. It's claiming 22% damage now. So that seems like a more accurate assessment with 100% recon over it. Wilhelmshaven is 64%. Also, I'm assuming that damage gets repaired. But if we go here and we go to the U-boat, what do we do here? Not naval ports, but is it naval ports? Are U-boat pens considered naval ports? So I guess maybe that's why Brest looks like just a port instead of a U-boat pen, because they don't actually have concrete enclosures yet, maybe? Yeah, U-boat yards and pens are the same thing. Okay. So Wilhelmshaven and Emden U-boat pens, 90%. That's not matching what I saw on the other screen. Maybe there's a delay there. 35%. 13,000 tons of shipping loss so far in the 2 days that we've been running the game. 0 U-boats sunk. U-boat efficiency 60%. 7% finding U-boats, 7% sinking. I don't know if U-boats get destroyed in port or exactly what bombing the pens does. Maybe it just reduces their efficiency. If we go to the command and control, we can see that the 91st Bomb Group has 47 B-17s, 40 ready, 7 damaged, 487 aircrew ready, 7 are wounded. You can see the morale is 59. Skill is 63.6. I think that's come up a bit since the start of the campaign. Courage is 60, 53, 54, and 83 in terms of organization, training, and motivation. The 97th Bomb Group, 48 B-17s ready, 45 of them, or 48 B-17s available, 45 of them ready, 3 damaged, no aircrew are wounded. Better training, worse motivation. 60.3 is the skill, which is a little bit worse skill, but better morale, worse courage. And then the 356 fighter groups, 7 damaged P-47s, 7 ready, 2 damaged. They've got 9 P-47s here. 20 aircrew are ready, 2 are wounded. Archie Old's squadron just absolutely got obliterated. Motivation is 21. Morale is somehow still very high. If we go to the depot here, you can see we've got no P-47s in surplus. 13 will arrive every week, but we basically have no fighter escorts for them. 13 B-17s are in surplus at the moment, and what have you here. I don't know how munitions get used. I wish that would be more clear. Like, I don't know if you can run out of bombs or what. It's not very clear, but you can see with those 2 raids, we've actually gained 1 more command point. So we're going to go ahead and put that command point into, I guess, fighter priority, because it seems like we're losing a ton of fighters. There's also no undo button, which would be nice, but like if I wanted to reduce my priority or make changes to command points, doesn't look like I have that option. We'll do 1 more raid here today. Let's make it something easy since I'm not going to have fighters to support. So let's hit one of the ports. Rotterdam, or we've got the Rotterdam shipyard or the Rotterdam port. First off, we're going to continue reconning both these pens to see if we get more intelligence on them, or if we see if they get repaired more. And then let's go ahead and hit Le Havre's port. Bomb the target with both B-17 groups. No fighters are available for escort at the moment. Okay. It's going to be a really early day for the bombers. 4 o'clock start time on a very close-in target. So the B-17's coming up here. About 90 of them. Again, we don't have enough aircraft to form new bomber groups, but as we get to 48 aircraft, we can form new formations. So that's another thing that probably plays into what kind of tempo you want to be using your bombers with. Like, I don't know if giving them days off improves their morale. I'm not really sure. It does in Gary Grigsby, and I'm sorry to keep bringing that game up, but that's, again, the only comparison I really have. But I do know, obviously, that if we lose more aircraft, if we keep pushing them and pushing them and pushing them, then we won't be able to form new groups, which will keep our raids smaller than otherwise. No apparent enemy fighter coverage here. We do have some flak. The smoke kicking up. I didn't choose to drop the bombs myself. The flak doesn't seem to be terribly dangerous, at least not at the moment. We haven't been hitting like really heavy flak targets, but it seems like the fighters are much more dangerous than the flak. I don't know that that's entirely historically accurate. The flak was definitely dangerous, although obviously the fighters were, like Schweinfurt, and talk about how many fighters shot down enemy bombers. But there you go. We bombed Le Havre. You can see the smoke and debris kicked up there. That will go away over the course of the day. I assume if you've got this cloud here, that means follow-on raids are going to have less accurate bombing strikes, because it does seem like each individual group of bombers drops on their own, And the more bombs that drop, the longer that cloud remains. So like if we did one bomber group, then that cloud would be less intense. The hard port damage is light. No bombers lost. No fighters lost. Intel at Emden. This is 144% damage. That it went from like nothing to 144%. Wilhelmshaven went from 60 to 53. I don't know how reliable those numbers are, despite the fact that it does say 100% recon. If we go to the Intel, we go to ports, 18% damage here. So this screen doesn't match with anything we saw on the previous screen. Emden 90, Wilhelmshaven 35, Har 49. These numbers don't seem to mesh. We're up to 20,000 tons now lost for our convoys this month. No U-boats sunk. Efficiency still at 60%. And yeah. One B-17 was pulled from surplus, I guess, to repair a maintenance B-17. We've got two P-38s and P-47s staying out of the stockpile here. There's no difference between aircrew for fighters or bombers, which is interesting. We're still in the first week of our operations. We're 3 days in. Go to, all right, 45 and 3, 46 and 2, 70, 59. Okay. And then we're at 9 P-47s. Is there a minimum amount that you can actually, like, use in an escort mission? So if I was to hit the metalworks here, I can't do a fighter sweep because I don't have any fighters to do it, I guess. So there must be a minimum amount for a fighter group to be effective. Let's go ahead and take the next 2 days off. Give the boys some rest. All the B-17s are returned to operational status. Morale didn't change. There's no, it doesn't, I'm assuming skill goes up the more raids you fly. I'm not really sure. It doesn't do a good job of explaining that. I don't know when the week ends. I just want to see what happens here to the surpluses. Okay, so the week ended now. We've been in for 6 days. We haven't launched any raids the last 3. Enemy ports, 18% damage. Still 90, 35, and 49. Let's do one more day of nothing. Let's check the recon here and see if anything changes. 14, 35, 7. Yeah. Well, I'm assuming these places get repaired over time, but I don't really know. It does say we sank 1 U-boat, 47,000 tons lost so far. So obviously hitting these ports has had no real appreciable effect on the campaign yet, but I wouldn't expect 3 days of bombing with 90 bombers to have much of an effect. It does look like we pulled our P-47s out of the stockpile here, so the fighter group is back up to 23 P-47s, so they can probably participate in raids now, I would assume. Yes, they can. And our B-17s are all ready. Crews are all ready. Do we have enough to form a new group? We don't. It'll be a couple more weeks of building aircraft to get enough to form another bomber group. We haven't lost too bad in the way of casualties. So yeah, this is Bomber Command. Pretty basic, but an interesting little game. I'm curious to see what your guys' thoughts are. You know, we definitely do not have enough games that factor in like planning air operations and things like that. You've got more modern stuff like Command Modern Operations. You've got very old games that are incredibly in-depth like Bombing the Reich, or somewhat newer games that are a little bit more abstract but more detailed than this, like War in the West, which has an air operations element to it. But I'm curious what you guys think about this. It's an interesting little thing. I would probably play it a little bit more and see how the air war evolves over time. But in any event, let me know your guys' thoughts below. Until next time, this is the Historical Gamer saying once again, thank you very much for watching, and I'm out.